This video is over an hour long because it's a compilation of multiple lessons I'm updating for my full QuickBooks Online for Construction and Contractors course. I'll put a link in the description for all my paid courses so you can see what that looks like. But this video you're going to see is actually about half of the content that I'm putting in this course. It's going to be pretty complete. As you go through the hour plus of this video, you will actually see 90% of the functionality that QuickBooks Online Plus and QuickBooks Online Advanced has to offer when it comes to construction and contractor type of accounting. However, if it becomes super evident that your contractor business, your construction business needs a lot more functionality, this is where you go to websites like apps.com, apps.com, you type the word construction, and then you can see all the apps that are designed to work within the QuickBooks Online ecosystem. One of my favorite is called Notify. I'm actually going to have a video coming soon in the channel that's going to go deep dive into how Notify works as an add-on to QuickBooks Online. But without regard of third-party apps, this video should give you a really good sort of A through C walkthrough on everything that QuickBooks Online Plus and QuickBooks Online Advanced has to offer when it comes to construction and contractor project-based management for accounting in QuickBooks Online. So I have a brand new QuickBooks Online file. It actually contains no data. I just set this up. I'm going to start making the basic configurations, and then I'm going to walk you through all the screens so you understand what the workflow will look like. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the gear menu, top right, and then I'm going to go into chart of accounts. I want to make sure that I have the proper chart of accounts for all the workflows so all my transactions are reporting into the right place. Let me start simply by going down and looking at my income accounts and seeing if I have the proper income accounts that I need. So I have billable expense income, discounts, sales of product, services, uncategorized. These are default accounts that come with QuickBooks Online. I'm going to create my own set of income accounts for this chart of accounts that's for a construction company. So I'm going to scroll all the way up. I'm going to look at the new button on the top right of the screen, click on new, and then I'll create the first account. So the first account, I'm just going to call this construction income. Pretty simple, straightforward. Account type is going to be income. So I have to scroll down until I find income. Under detail type, I'm just going to choose other primary income. It's a pretty straightforward option. Okay. Then I'm going to click on save, and that's it. I have my construction income account. If I type CONS in the chart of accounts, it will filter it down. I got my construction income account. Now, under that construction income account, I want to create subcategories or sub-accounts. So let's do each one. I'm going to click on the new button on the top right, and then I'm going to do the first one, labor. I'm going to make this a sub-account. So I click on the little checkbox, make it a sub-account, and we'll make that a sub-account of construction income. Now, for the account type, I'm going to continue doing the same thing, and I'll select income and then other primary income. That would be kind of the common theme here. Then I'll click on save. Perfect. I'm just going to remove the filter here and just type the word income, and then we can see all of our income accounts. And then I'll remove the word income and I'll put labor, and then there's my labor income account. Now notice that there's also a cost of labor that's actually a cost of goods sold, which is a good sort of counter account to that. I probably want to change the name of that account to labor income. It will probably be a lot easier to read. So we're going to go to edit there. I'm just going to put here labor income. And then click on save. And that's it. I'll remove the filter one more time so we get to see our whole chart of accounts. I'll scroll all the way down one more time so we can see our income accounts. And notice I have my construction income account and the sub-account of labor. That's what I wanted to see. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a duplicate button. That would be quite nice if you could duplicate from here. You just can't. It's just not an option. So you're going to have to be creating each of these accounts separately. So let's scroll down. Let's go to new again. And now let's do materials income. Again, every construction company is going to have its own style. I just happen to be following this particular schema. Labor, income, equipment, that sort of thing. But you're going to follow your own system based on how you manage your company. So we're going to make this a sub-account of construction income again. click on save, and then we'll do one more. We'll call this one equipment income. So we got equipment income, follow the same formula. This is going to be an income account, other primary income, sub-account of construction income. Yeah, so there we go. You see a preview of what these are going to look like. Construction income, income equipment, labor income. Pretty clear. You get to see exactly what that's going to look like. If I want to add more in the future, I can do that. I'm going to go ahead and click on save. I'm going to type here in the search COGS for a second, because QuickBooks creates this COGS or cost of goods sold accounts. Notice it created cost of goods sold labor, cost of goods sold rental equipment, cost of goods sold freight, cost of goods sold materials and supplies, or supplies and materials. This freight I might not need. Maybe I never really pay for freight. So if I don't want that, I can just delete that account. Like I don't have to have accounts that I'm never going to use. It's up to you, really. So we're simplifying it, and we have a cost of labor, equipment rental, and supplies and materials, cost of goods sold account, which is my direct expenses. And then if I type income, and we see all of our income accounts, I got equipment income, labor income, and materials income. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We get to see a 1-to-1 ratio between my income accounts and my cost of goods sold accounts. And this is going to make a lot more sense once we start invoicing and you start seeing what that looks like. Okay, so I'm done with the chart of accounts. Let's now go into our products and services list. There's two ways to get to it. One, you can click on the sales tab on the left-hand side and then click on products and services. That's one option. The other one is we can click on the gear menu, and then we can click on right here where it says lists. We can click on products and services list. Either one take you to the exact same page. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. Now I'm going to click on add an item to create the very first item. And the first item is going to be the item type is going to be a service. That's kind of the first step. So we're going to call this one labor. Okay, we're going to follow the exact same pattern. We'll skip SKU and category for now. We can go back and look at those stuff later, or maybe within a different context. Under description, we'll put just here labor charges. And then the income account, I'm going to type labor. And then on the sales side, the income account is going to be labor income. Okay, you see there it's called construction income, labor income. It's a full sub account. Then on the purchasing side or the expense side, I want to click on this little checkbox because I want to be able to use that labor item in a expense, in a bill, in a purchasing expense type of transaction. So the expense account for this, I'm going to type labor. That's going to be this cost of goods sold labor account. So now you see how this stuff starts making sense. We got an item or a product or a service that is going to be linking the sales side you see up here to the income account, and the purchasing side or the expense side to the cost of goods sold account. That's kind of the first step. We'll click save and close. Now on this screen, you do have the option to duplicate. That's actually pretty cool. So you can just basically right click there, and now on this screen, this is pretty neat. Here it says edit right next to it. You can right click. Now on this screen, here's my labor item. Right on the action column, instead of clicking on edit, I can click on the drop down menu and I can click on duplicate. We didn't have the ability to duplicate on the chart of accounts, but we do on this screen. So we definitely want to take advantage of that. Click on duplicate. It's going to create a new item called labor copy. We don't need that. We're going to call this equipment. And then we're just going to come down here and put equipment charges. Okay, so we're kind of following the same formula. The income account is now going to go to equipment income. The expense account is going to go to equipment rental. Okay, and then we click save and close. And then we're going to do one more, which is going to be, we're going to duplicate that. That's going to be for materials. So we'll put here materials. This part, again, seems a little bit repetitive, kind of boring, really. But it is kind of part of the setup. You need to have that product and service that's going to tie to the actual forms of the transactions, tying to the correct income account, and then tying to the correct cost of goods sold account. And we're going to start with this simple premise of we got three items. We got equipment, labor, and materials. This one called hours, QuickBooks created by default. Sometimes we can get rid of it, sometimes we can't. Let's see if this one will let me. Okay, it won't, just because it's a very specific item that's used in other contexts. So unfortunately, we kind of have to live with that hours item. We could reorganize the list in such a way so we put these three equipment, labor, materials into like its own category. So that way we see them as a different grouping. So we can do that. So I'm going to click on more on the top right and then click on manage category. So I'm going to create a category. I'm going to go to new. I'm just going to type this construction. Okay. And you don't have to do the categories. This is just one way that I'm thinking you can organize your product and services list, just in case you have other items there that you don't want to confuse. So I can select all of my items here, the ones that I want, again, the ones that I want to put in this subcategory. And then I can click up here, it says assign category. And I can assign all of them in one shot to construction. Then I click on save. And now they're all part of a category. And then this one called hours, I can put it into some other category for now. So I'm going to go back to manage categories and I'll create one called other. And then I'm going to put hours here under the category of other. Now, this process of selecting a whole bunch and then clicking on assigning category, that's the batching option. If you want to do one at a time, you just edit it. And then there is a drop down for category. So you can select each category, each item, you can change this category one by one if you need to. Okay, beautiful. So now we have our item set up. We have a chart of accounts set up. Now we can start creating some transactions. Now, the very first thing you want to do is create your customer and then create your project. So to create your customer, we're going to click here, it says customers and leads. Go in there and then I have a couple of tabs. I have overview, customers, marketing. I'm going to go into customers and here's my customer list or my customer database. I can import it if I happen to have a spreadsheet. So I can take my spreadsheet and import it. Importing customers is a very common situation where you set up QuickBooks for the first time, but your business has already existed for many months or years. When you're starting from zero, you'll probably be creating the customers as they start showing up. But you can import it here with a spreadsheet if you need to. I'll just create one by one. Simply, I'm going to click on add customer manually. Click on that. And then I'll start. So let's say this customer is called Joe Mitchell. Actually, we'll go here to first name. Joe Mitchell. Okay. And that's it. I can add email, phone number, address, all that stuff you can do for the sake of time. I'll skip all that. And then I'm going to click on save. So I'm going to have officially my first customer. Once I go into the screen, now the screen looks like this. I got my list of customers here. I can pick from my multiple customers. I'll create one more customer. There's a little tiny plus button here that you can use to create a new customer. Okay, and then let's say this one's called Mary Garcia, and then I'll click on save. So I have two customers. I got Mary Garcia, I got Joe Mitchell. Now, in the context of construction or contracting, what you want to do is you want to create projects. So the customers are your billing entity. They're who you're going to send the invoices to. But the projects are going to be the measuring entity of each project. Okay, so each time you're going to do work for them, you want to put them as a new separate project. So we're going to click on start project and create the first project. And let's just say this is called the kitchen remodel. And then that's going to be for Joe Mitchell. Okay. And on start date, we can put, okay, the project's going to start June 1st and the project should end. And this is like a projected end date. Should end August 31st. And the default status is going to be in progress or not started. You could choose whatever you want and add additional notes if you need to. I'm going to click on save. And now my kitchen remodel project is in here. If I click on the all projects link in the top, I'm going to go to the very first page where it shows all your projects. And there's filters here so you can only look at in progress, not started, all statuses, so you can see all your projects. I'll create one more project and then we're going to call it backyard remodel. And then that would be a project for Mary Garcia. And then Mary Garcia's project started, let's say May 1st, and it should end, we'll just put here August 14th. Okay. And let's say we'll put this one in progress and then click on save. So now I got 2 projects. Let me just go back here to all projects. I got 2 projects that have different statuses. So one is in progress, one's not started. And we have the 2 start dates and then the projected ending dates there as a general starting point for the information about the project. Now, we haven't done any transactions here. We just kind of got started by creating the chart of accounts, the items, the projects. This is a slow build towards, eventually what's going to be all of the transactions related to these 2 projects. Let's start by clicking on the backyard remodel. And then inside my backyard remodel project, I'm going to start with the very first transaction per se, which should be your starting point, which is your estimate. So I'm going to click on the drop-down menu here and then click on estimate. I do want to bring something out. There's something else called a cost estimate, which I want to cover afterwards. That's actually available in the advanced edition of QuickBooks Online. All this time at this point, we've been working with QuickBooks Online Plus, and everything that I'm showing you now up to the point that I let you know from this point forward, this is going to be advanced only. All the stuff is available in the Plus edition of QuickBooks Online. Okay, so we started a regular estimate, not a cost estimate, a regular estimate. And then down here, it tells you what project is for. It's for my backyard project. So very, very clearly stating there what it's for. There's my build to. Now, I didn't put an address at the beginning. That's why it's not showing here. But I can put 101 Main Street and then continue putting my address and it will save that. So that's one other place that you can do that. And then we're going to start with entering all of the line items from the project. So we're going to start with, let's say, labor. And let's say for this project, it's going to be, just to say, 15 hours of labor for $150 per hour. And then we're going to have here equipment. And let's say we're going to charge a flat fee for the equipment we're going to bring of $500. And then we're going to do materials. And let's say the materials are just going to be $12,500. Okay. So there's my project for the backyard remodel. And it's right here, $15,250. Now, in this estimate, we're not putting any information about what it cost me, what it cost my company, because the way the projects works in QuickBooks Online Plus, you don't have the ability to project your costs. As I mentioned earlier, you got to be in the advanced edition to have a cost estimate, which is the one where you put both your internal costs and what you're going to charge your customer. So on the Plus edition of QuickBooks Online, estimates to projects are only for you to put the amounts that you're going to charge, not the amounts that you're going to pay for. Okay. All right. So now we have the estimate set up. We're going to click on save. We can actually preview to see what this estimate is going to look like. And then there we go. It's got labor, equipment, and materials. Here's the $3 amounts. Here's the $15,000. Now, many people tell me, Hector, I want this estimate to look much different. I don't want to break it down into these 3 things. Maybe internally, I want to know what the 3 things are, but I don't want to show my customer the 3 things. How would I do something like that? And the way we solve that is with bundles. So we'll go back and do that in a second. The other thing I want to show you here is, which is customization. You can also edit some of these things. So if you wanted to remove some of these additional pieces of information that you don't need, estimate status, estimate number, estimated date, all these things, you can actually choose what you want to show, if you want to show that or not. So that's some couple of options you get there. So we're going to go ahead and click on save, and then I can send it to my customer, maybe get a payment. That process we're not going to cover here. We're just covering the sort of the accounting step-by-step workflows. So I'm going to X out of that, and then I should have finally an estimate in the books, which is showing right here, estimate 10001 for the backyard model. Now, I'm going to create another estimate for the other project. So now I got this other project called the kitchen remodel. But for that one, I'm going to hide the details. So I'm just going to have one lump sum item that we're going to show to the customers in an estimate. We're not going to break it down with all the items. We'll still keep an internal breakdown, but we won't show that to our client. So we're going to go here in the sales tab on the left-hand side and then go into products and services. And then in products and services, we're going to go to new. On the top right, we'll click on new. And then we're going to do a new bundle. Bundle, that's what we're going to do, right? So when we do a bundle, we're just going to call this project. I'm just going to call it project cost or something like that. That really doesn't matter what you call it. And then here was the sales description. We're going to put total project cost. And then here it says items included in the bundle. That's where I get to choose, do I want to see the details or do I not want to see the details? So we're going to hit no or uncheck that. We're not going to see the details, but then we're going to break down and put our labor, and the second one would be materials, and the third one would be equipment. Okay, so we are putting all this stuff in here. We're presetting sort of a template. Quantities, we're going to leave all that stuff in one. We actually don't need to mess with that. And then click on save and close. So now that I have my bundle, it's going to be much easier for me to create those estimates, break down the details, but not show it to the customer when you print or email the estimate. So let's go back into projects. And then we're going to go into kitchen remodel. So we're going to go inside of our kitchen remodel project for Joe Mitchell. And then we're going to click on add to project on the top right. And then we're going to do estimate. So we'll go to estimate. And then down here where it says product or service, we're going to pick this project cost bundle. Now, unfortunately, they don't label it. So it's really obvious to you that that's a bundle and not a regular item. You kind of just have to know. But we'll select project bundle and then it preloads the 3 items for me. And then it puts hidden under it to remind you that that stuff is not going to print. Now, inside, you can actually enter all the details. So let's say this is going to be 34 hours at $125 an hour. So let's say this is going to be $5,000. So this will be $5,000. And then my materials will be, let's say, $3,700. And then for equipment, let's say it's going to be $1,500. Okay. So now you get to see the total, which is $10,200. That's what your customer will see. Once I click on save and I go into PDF view, you see that for the customer, it's simply project cost $10,200. So no details. We keep information about the details internally, but the customer doesn't see any of those details. So we'll go back to our project screen so we can see all of our projects. We still don't have any income or costs because we've only done setup at this point. Now, before getting started, I'm going to go into reports where it says find report by. I'm going to type the word estimate so we can see what are the reports that we have available. So we have estimates by customer, and then we get to see a report of the 2 active estimates that we have. Okay, these are under pending status. And then I'll go back into the report page again, type estimate one more time. And then we have estimate and progress invoicing summary by customer. When I click on that, it's going to show me both of my customers, pending status, amount, none of it has been invoiced. Okay, and remaining amount, 100% remaining amount. So let's start creating some invoices for these projects. So let's go into projects. And let's say for the backyard remodel project, we want to invoice, let's say 20% of it. So we go to transactions. I'm going to click on the estimate itself. And then I should be able to create an invoice straight from here. I'm going to click on manage on the top right of the screen. And then where it says actions, I have make copy, delete, or audit history. And then I have pending. So I'm going to switch pending to accepted. And then once I switch pending to accepted, now I can convert to an invoice. So let me save that. And then I'm going to click on convert to an invoice. Okay, and then the entire thing will be converted into an invoice because I don't have something's called progress invoice enabled. I got to enable progress invoicing. So instead of the whole thing being invoiced, it will ask me what percentage would you like to invoice. So we'll X out of that. We'll click on the gear menu, top right of the screen, click on gear, and then we go to account and settings right there under your company. Then we're going to click on the sales tab, the left-hand side, sales, and then we scroll down to something called progress invoicing. You want to turn that on. It's a really good feature to have. And then we click here on update, and then save, and then done. Okay, that allows me to go back into my estimate, and then when I'm ready to convert to an invoice, it's now going to give me a pop-up saying, how much of this invoice would you like to estimate? So I can do percentage of amount and then put 20%. And then QuickBooks will only invoice 3,500, which is 20% of the 15,000. What's really cool also, I can click on manual entry for each line, click on create invoice, and then inside each line, I can put whatever percentage I want. So I can come in here and put 20%, 20%, 20%, and then I'll redo the calculation for me. So you don't have to do this. You don't have to do progress invoicing. Okay, that's only if you want to use this style of invoicing. If I click on save, and then we get to see what that looks like. That's always the really important piece, is what does it look like to my customer? Now we see something like quantity 3 because it was a 15 before, I believe what the original was. And then we had 1 divided by 5 or multiplied by 0.2. This stuff could be confusing to your customer. So you kind of want to be careful with using progress invoicing in this specific matter. It's actually a lot easier to read when you use the other method, the lump sum method. So we'll show you that as well. So I'm going to click on save. What I would probably do, let me go back into my invoice. What I probably would do to provide some context, I would probably click and drag a line all the way in the top and then put here 20% to get project started or something like that. So just basically adding a little bit of a note. So it's a bit easier to understand, more contextual. When I go back into PDF view, the customer can read clearly, okay, that's exactly what they're trying to achieve here. They're trying to invoice 20% of the invoice or the estimate rather. Okay, so that's just kind of something to think about when it comes to the presentation of your forms, right? Because your customers will always act confused as an excuse not to pay you. That's kind of like the ethos of a customer. So we have an invoice here for $3,050. Let's go back into all projects and let's take a look at what the screen looks like now. It looks like one of our projects has some income. Now, this doesn't measure whether or not the customer has paid you or not. This is whether you have invoiced your customer. That's a different issue. Whether they have paid you that invoice, different issue altogether. Let's go into kitchen remodel and let's invoice, let's say 35% of this estimate. And that's what the contract said. So that's what we're going to do. We'll go to kitchen remodel. We'll go to manage here. We'll convert it from pending to accepted. That's a really important piece. It needs to be accepted. And then we click convert to invoice. Then once we convert to invoice, we're going to do a flat percentage of the amount and do 35%. And then we're going to click on create invoice. So once we do that, remember this particular estimate had a bundle with a lump sum. So you're going to have all sorts of like what look like complicated numbers and quantities and percentages here. But then once we actually save it and do a PDF view, it's going to be much easier for your customer to read and understand. And again, I would probably go in here and in the description of the invoice, I would put something like 35% of the total project cost to get the work started. Okay, and then we'll save that and we'll go back and see what this looks like. And again, adding more clarity, your customer will pay you much quicker if you're being clear about what you're invoicing. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's X out of that and let's go back into both of our projects. And notice I got both my projects here and the income associated with the project. 100% profit margin because there's no cost so far. But that gives you a general idea like how projects work and kind of like what's the purpose of everything we've been doing up to this point. Now, let's add some expense transactions. So let's go into new and let's go into expense. And let's say that I'm going to use, pay cash for some materials, for example. So let's create here the vendor. We'll create Home Depot. So we'll create a vendor really quick for Home Depot. And then we're paying this out of our cash account. You can pay this with a credit card or with a bank account. We haven't even set those up in this file yet, but just give you a general idea. And then under category, and this is kind of the tricky part, is do you want to use the same items you used on the invoice? And the answer is yes, you do. But here I don't even have the choice to do that. So I would have to go straight into my materials COGS account and register the expenses straight into my COGS account. So let's say this was 987.62. And I'm gonna select, there's a key element here, customer project, that's gonna be for the kitchen remodel. And then we're gonna click on save. Now, we're gonna X out of that for a second, and then we're gonna go back into projects, and we get to see, now we got profit margin, now we got a cost element, now this thing's starting to make more sense. Now I'm gonna go back into that kitchen remodel project, go back into transactions, and take a look at this expense. And as I mentioned earlier, we only had a category, an account as an option. We didn't have the option to use items or products and services, which I recommend you do, especially as a really important setup towards working with QuickBooks Online Advanced, so you can get more advanced projects, which we're gonna cover briefly. So I'm gonna X out of that and show you how to enable that feature so you can also use products and services in expense transactions. So we're gonna click on the gear menu, top right, and we're gonna go to account and settings. And in account and settings, we're gonna go where it says expenses actually. So this time we'll go to expenses. And then we're gonna turn on this feature that says show items table on expenses and purchase forms. So we turn that on. So we're gonna click on save first to save that setting. So now that it shows show items table on expenses, now you see that it's on. Now we're gonna click on done. And then we'll go back to the expense transaction. Okay, and then here on the search tab on the top, I'm gonna click on expense Home Depot, click on that, and there's my transaction. And notice that now I have this category details as a general category that can collapse and expand. And I also have item details. So I can get rid of this line and now use my materials item. And we'll put here the dollar amount again, 987.62, and then the project. Now, for now, it doesn't seem to make any sense to use the items versus the categories. But later on, when you're analyzing and breaking down reports, you want to see a one-to-one relationship with all the items that you are invoicing and then that you're also expensing. So kind of get used to using items instead of categories, which means you have to have paid attention at the very beginning where we created the income account, the cost of goods sold accounts, and then the items that were pointing to the correct income account and the correct cost of goods sold account, whether it was in a sales context or in a purchasing context. Let's say we're gonna pay a subcontractor, so let's go write a check. We'll write a check to a new contractor. Let's call this guy Garcia Plumbing, and we'll save that. And then we're gonna write a check. Let's say check 1041, and then the item category in this case will be labor, because it's a contractor, it's a third-party contractor that we're bringing in. And let's say that person's charging us for 7 hours, $68.50 an hour for $479 total. And then this is also for the kitchen remodel job. And then we'll go ahead and click on save and close. And let's say we got a bill from the equipment company that we rent some equipment from. And then let's say this is called Equipment Depot. We'll create that vendor. And let's say we haven't paid them yet, but we did get the bill for it. We'll go down, open item details. We'll type here equipment item. And let's say we just paid $400. And we'll put some description here. We'll put renting backhoe or whatever. Okay. Then we'll click on save. X out of that bill. Go back into our projects. And now we get to see a lot more richness of information in this project. We see our profit margins is also being affected. If I click on kitchen remodel, I can see a higher level of detail. For example, I got some construction income here. I see cost of goods sold, which I can expand and see the specific categories that are being affected. Okay. And then if there's categories that are not cost of goods sold, that are just regular expenses, you're actually going to see them on this side here in the bottom. And then if I'm doing payroll, like actually running payroll through QuickBooks, the time that I put on timesheets, those will be accrued down here as well. We'll skip that part because that's just more complex. I got to turn on payroll and all that sort of thing. We'll focus on contractors, cost of labor, materials, equipment, that sort of thing. I wonder where is that my equipment charge? Let me just go back and see which project did I put that into. Let's click here. It says Equipment Depot. And oh yes, of course, if I don't put the customer project, it's not gonna go in there correctly. So let me just put kitchen remodel. So good thing that I missed it because it gives you an opportunity to kind of see how these reports will take you into a total tailspin because you're expecting certain information to see in here. And if you don't see it, that's because you probably missed selecting the project inside the expense transaction itself. So this gives you a good idea, kind of the progress of the project. You kind of see what's going on with the project. Here it says transactions. I can see all my transactions associated with the project. Time activity, that would be if I put time data into a timesheet. To give you a general idea, if we go to new and then go into time entry, right? So right there where it says team, I can pick which employee I want to add time for. So I'm going to click here, it says add time. And then I can add my employee. So let's go add employee. And then let's say I have Carlos Smith as my employee. And let's say we hired him a couple years ago. So there's my employee. So it's in my database now. So now that I have him, I can click on him. And then I can say, all right, so he worked, let's say 8 hours on specific project on Mary Garcia backyard remodel. And under service, I can put here labor. Okay, and then I can click on save. And then on Monday, worked 4 hours on the other project on Joe Mitchell kitchen remodel. Service would be labor. And then click on done. So that's how we enter time. Now, since we don't have any payroll or any prevailing wages set up for any of them, what happens is when I go back into projects and I open up any of my projects, I under hourly time costs, nothing shows up here because there's nothing to calculate. I'll go back to the other project. Let's go to backyard remodel and let's go into time activity. There's the time activity there. So I can see the 8 hours spent for labor, but there's no cost because there's no cost has been associated with any of the time activities. There's a particular area in QuickBooks where you can actually calculate or put the prevailing cost of those employees, which is going to be here where it says payroll employees. Then we actually select the employee's name. We go up here, it says actions, and we go to change status. And then once we scroll down, there's a cost rate. So I just entered $41.90 in there. That's my new cost rate. That's how much this employee costs. And then once I go back and create more time for it, so let's go to new, time entry, and we'll select our employee again. Let's say we had 7 hours on a particular project. We'll pick here the kitchen remodel under the service labor. You can select to make it billable or not. That's if you want to invoice your customer for it later. I'm going to uncheck it for a second and then click on done and then click on save. And then we're going to go back into our projects again. And then we go into kitchen remodel. And then we go and look at our hourly time costs, which right now is showing 0. But if I click on that and I go into the time entry and I make it billable to the customer, and this is kind of the tricky part about QuickBooks Online. I personally don't like the fact that I have to click on this checkbox. But if I put billable to the customer and then click on save, now you actually get a report where it tells you the cost rate and the cost. So it's actually showing in the report what would be the cost of that employee. I can go back into my project details, and now I get to see an actual cost on the payroll side. Now, what's interesting about this is I have not turned on payroll, and I'm not going to do that for this example, but once you turn payroll on, then this flat number you gave it, 41.90 or whatever, that I went into the employee section and just put a number, is no longer going to pull the data from it. Now it's going to pull the actual data from the paychecks, and it's going to include your payroll taxes as part of your cost that goes in here. Up here it says employee rate, hourly cost, payroll expenses. So if I click on payroll expenses, it's going to show nothing because there hasn't been any actual payroll being run. But if I just leave it in hourly cost, it will use that information that I put in the timesheet, the number of hours, and then the underlying cost rate on the employee settings to kind of estimate what these cost is. Now, what's interesting about this too, and again, I won't do an example with payroll specifically, but this hourly cost is actually non-posting. It's just an exercise. So these costs, 2,328, are not going to show up in your profit and loss. That will only show up with your profit and loss once you run payroll. It's a very tricky part about using labor costing in projects. So if I click here on payroll expenses, my profit for this job is 1,702 because I have not run payroll. But if I put here hourly cost, my profit is 1,241.98. So because I haven't run payroll, when I go run a profit and loss report, I'm not going to see the 1,200, I'm going to see the 1,700. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to click on reports, go into profit and loss, and then we'll do a profit and loss by customer. And then under period, I'll just put all dates and then click on run so we can see it. As you can see here, a kitchen remodel has a profitability of 1,702, not of the 1,200, because again, only actual payroll will post into your profit and loss. Anything you just put in a timesheet will still be non-posting. Really important piece to keep in mind. So let's go back into projects and let's just open up, let's say the kitchen remodel project one more time. Let's go here where it says project reports. And you get a couple of project reports. You get project profitability. We can click on that and then we get the same exact report we got before. What's interesting about specifically this one is if you run the project profitability, not the profit and loss report, but if you run the project profitability report, so it will show you the hourly cost you see here. It's not a real expense that shows up in your profit and loss, but it shows in this particular report called the project profitability. So you do get a little bit of the look and feel as a P&L, including those hourly costs that again wouldn't post in a regular P&L because we haven't run payroll. If you actually run payroll, then it shows up, no problem. I'm just kind of showing you without running payroll so you kind of see what that looks like. Then we have this one called time cost by employee or vendor. If I click on that, you get same report you saw before. These are just the hours of your employees and the cost associated with it for this specific project. And the last one here is unbilled time and expenses. That's if we marked any particular expense as billable, it will show up in here, although we don't need to bill the customer for that time because we already are including it in the estimate and in the invoice. Here in the project details, you just see general information about the project. And if you want to add any attachments, any pictures, any documents, contracts, whatever, to the projects, you can do that. Okay. So there's a lot of usefulness to the project screen, a lot of awesome things that you can do. If we go back to the projects, I can start one of these projects if that's like a principal project that I want to see all the way in the top. I can change the status. So if I want to mark this in progress or mark it completed or mark it canceled or edit it or delete it, I can do it all from here. So that allows you to organize this list in whichever way, shape, or form. Remember, these costs here contain hourly costs. If we switch over to payroll, it will only pick up the costs from the paycheck, including, as I mentioned earlier, the taxes related to payroll. So right now, payroll expenses, there's nothing show up in there because we haven't run payroll in this particular company. Another great place to point out where you can add your employees' hourly rates, again, if you're not running payroll and you want to use this prevailing wage concept, we go up here, it says employee hourly wage, click on edit, and then we can change the rate here. There's a little really cool calculator where you can actually arrive to that number. So let's say the wages here is 33.50, and then it'll calculate, what would be the taxes, and then you can put here another dollar, and then you can manually calculate exactly what is the sort of end rate that this employee would have. Again, this is a calculated amount, not so much a real mathematical accounting amount. And then based on this cost rate, that's the actual formula that I would use on the future for all future transactions. It will use that next time I enter more time, it will use that to calculate the hourly cost based on that information that you put on this employee hourly rate screen. So as you add a bunch of employees, you can be changing all this stuff on the fly. And then every time you create new timesheets for them, that's the hourly wage for the project that it will load in. Again, and I've repeated this 100 times, once you run payroll, that number is ignored and it'll use the actual numbers that are coming out of the paycheck. Let's take a look at a couple more reports related to projects. So we're going to go back into reports on the left-hand side. And then let's go back and look at the progress invoice report that we saw earlier that didn't have any numbers. So we'll go estimates and progress invoicing by customer summary. So we'll pull that report. And now we get to see, while this loads here, we get to see that now percentages are being loaded here. Now we get original amount, we get invoice amount, and most importantly, remaining amount, which is the amount of the estimate that has not been invoiced yet. Now we'll go back to our report list, and then let's do a income by customer summary. That's an interesting one as well. You get to see every one of your projects, and then you get to see the income side, and you get also to see the expense side. So you get to see plenty of useful information when it comes to reports. Another interesting report to look at is a detailed transaction report. So we'll come down here and look up maybe a transaction detail by account. That's essentially going to give you everything that's in this file. But what's interesting about a transaction detail by account is then I can choose how I'm going to group this report, and I can group this report by customer, for example, and then you're going to get to see, okay, for this particular customer or project, we got all these invoices, expenses, bills, etc., etc. And then for this other project, we got the bill and all these lines from the invoice. You get to see all the information. You can do a little bit more filtering. So I'm going to click on customize on the top right of the screen. I'm going to go into filter, and I'm going to go into distribution account, click on the drop down menu and select income and expense accounts. That way the report's a little bit more precise on the information that's displaying for you. And then we'll also click on the little gear menu here, and then we'll remove amount, because amount's a little bit confusing. And then we'll bring here debit and credit. That way, now we get to see the report a little bit different context. So we have our Joe Mitchell kitchen remodel account or project. And then we see here debit. Okay, these are all my expenses. And we see here credit. This is all my income. Same thing for this other project. So it's interesting as well. I can, instead of grouping it by a customer, I can group it by product or service. Click on run, and then we can see a different point of view. So now we have in the equipment side, we have all of the debits, in this case, the expenses, and then here we have the credits. And this is why I like to use items, products and services, because I get to see it in this dimension. Because if I use accounts instead, what happens with accounts is all of the income side gets grouped in the top, and then all the expense side gets grouped in the bottom, and then you don't get to like sort of compare one to one. So yeah, you can go look at your equipment income and then go down and look at my equipment rental, but they're not always the same order. There's just a lot more sort of scanning through the report that you have to make, which is why I particularly advocate for using products and services, because you get to do some interesting things like this in reports where you can sort of analyze one particular category, both on the expenses and the income side, on the debits and the credit side. We can also go back into sales, products and services, and make sure that all of the items or the products or services are categorized to the right category. So then you can use the categories as groupings for the report. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and click here where it says more, and then go to manage categories. And then let's say I only have two major categories. One's called labor and the other one is called materials and equipment. We're going to ignore this other for now, but we have just two major categories. And then we'll go back and enable visualization of categories here. And then we're just going to make sure that equipment is being tied to materials and equipment, hours and labor, both tied to labor, and the materials being tied to materials and equipment. So we have multiple products that all are encompassed only really into two major categories. So when we go back into reports and then we start running our product-based reports, so we can do products, sales by product summary, for example, that's a good one. And then basically you see them grouping here. We have our one labor, item or product or service, and then we have our 2 materials and equipment broken down. We can collapse each one if we want to and just get a summary in there. If we go back and type product or service one more time, and we get to see kind of all the different options. We have sales by product and services detail. That's going to take you to a detailed report that you can also collapse. So you can see every transaction associated with it. You can see the totals associated with it. We'll go back and do, let's say, purchases by product or services detail. That's also a pretty interesting one. So we get to see all the purchases here in the new reporting system. We can also collapse the major categories, see the totals. These are purchases, so this is the cost side. So we can see, we can also expand and kind of see the details per transaction in there. And let's switch over to the features related to QuickBooks Online Advanced. So I'm going to click on the gear menu top right and then click right there to subscriptions and billings. And we're going to notice that we're currently on the Plus version of QuickBooks Online. So everything I showed you so far is available in this Plus edition. I'm going to show you some additional features that are only available in the Advanced edition. So I'm going to upgrade my plan here on my sample file. And we're going to be in Advanced edition. Once we are in Advanced edition, now we can talk about the additional features that Advanced has, which is really powerful, which you're about to see. So the first major feature is called cost estimates. If I click on the new button here on the left-hand side and then go into my regular estimates, we're still on the regular estimates mode. It doesn't say cost estimate here. And it is kind of tricky because there's a very specific place you can get to cost estimates from. So we're going to X out of that. And we're going to go into projects. And in projects, let's create a brand new project just for this specific case. So we're going to type new project here. And let's do a new project for Joe Mitchell. And we're going to call this master bathroom remodel. So we got master bathroom remodel. And then we'll put start date, let's put June 1st, and end date, we will put here July 31st. We'll leave it here in progress and then click on save. So now we got a brand new project, which is a master bathroom remodel. I'm going to click back to all projects so you can see that we are running 3 projects at the moment. So now once you're inside the project, so we're going to click in there and you're in this particular page. And this is the only page that you can create the cost estimate from. We're going to click here in the top right where it says add to project. We're going to click on the drop down menu and then we're going to click on where it says project estimate, also known as a cost estimate. So a project estimate or a cost estimate is one that looks just like an estimate, but also keeps a little tracker here in the top of the estimated cost. So you're actually going to track 2 pieces of information. One, how much you think all the components of the job are going to cost you, and 2, how much you want to charge for. So you keep tabs of that profit margin or projected estimated profit margin on the entire job. So we're going to scroll down here. I'm going to go ahead and close this right drawer. And then I'm going to use this project cost bundle that we created earlier that actually contains the 3 items here: equipment, materials, and labor. And again, some projects will have a lot more items, a lot more details. But for now, we'll just stick to these 3 for the example. So let's say for equipment charges, let's say, and it says right here, your rate hidden, letting you know that your customer will not see this. So your rate, let's say I'm going to pay $150 per hour and I'm going to rent the machine for 4.5 hours. So we'll put here 150 and we'll put here backhoe rental. Okay. Apparently backhoe is the only equipment I know about. So there we go. And then we're going to put here the markup. So how much money are we going to make? How much money do we plan to make on this? So let's say we plan to make about 40% on that. So we'll type 40, and then this will figure out what the customer rate is and then what the customer total should be. So that's a individual piece of the job. That's $945 of revenue. Now we got materials and equipment. So let's say for this, we're estimating about $12,500 in materials, and we want to make, let's say, a 60% markup on that. So it tells you here how much you should be charging for that customer rate, and let's say that's $20,000. And then we have our labor. So let's say we're gonna subcontract this, and it's about 46 hours worth of work, and we're paying $75 an hour for the labor. And let's say for the labor, we want to mark it up 25%. So here's my three numbers, 945, 20,000, and 4312. The total here is 25,257. If I go all the way here in the top, which is really the important piece, we get our estimated cost. 16,000 is how much we're going to pay for the job, materials, equipment, labor. We got the estimated income for 25,000, how much we're going to charge our customer, and then what the estimated profit margin is. So this particular project estimate or cost estimate, again, only available in the advanced edition of QuickBooks Online. We're going to leave these here as billable, although we're actually not going to be billing them. We'll leave that in there for now. We're going to click on save, and then now we have created our project estimate. We can do the same thing we did with the progress invoicing, where we can convert this to an accepted estimate. So our customer agreed to do this project. We can actually put here who accepted it. So Hector accepted it, and then the acceptance date was, let's say, May 16th, and then we can convert this into an invoice, do the conversion into an invoice that will save the current estimate, and then open up the new invoice screen with whatever percentage we want to put. Let's say we want to do 10%. That's how much we require to get the job started. We'll go to create invoice. QuickBooks will now create the invoice from the estimate using 10%. Sometimes it needs to approximate because of the rounding. It needs to approximate. So approximately 10%. I could put manually 10 here if I want to fix it, and then I can fix the rounding. So sometimes it gets a little bit tricky with the rounding, just trying to get to that exact percentage for the grand total. So down here in the invoice, we see 2,500, 25.75. Notice that there's no information about costs or margin. Estimates don't carry that information. The invoices don't carry that information. Only estimates do. After I save the invoice, you're going to see up here in the top where it says invoice, there's a little link that says link transactions. If I click on that, then I get to see what are all the transactions that are linked to it. I can remove the linking. And in some cases, you're going to see a link here, so you can actually click and go to that transaction. I don't know why my screen is not showing here, but here on the right-hand side, I can see it. So if I click on that little icon, okay, that little link icon that's there, that would actually take me into a new page, a new tab, where I can see the actual estimate. So there is a way for you to sort of go back and forth and open up the invoice. I got the invoice on one tab. I got the estimate on the other tab. Once I'm in the estimate itself, you actually get to see here where it says linked invoices. So I can click on that, and then I can click on see that one. The link is working here. I can open. So there's ways for you to sort of get back and forth. But we went ahead and we invoiced this project, so we can actually save and close, get out of there. We can close the other tab. Let's go back into the project screen, and let's go back into our master bathroom remodel. Now, what kind of information we're seeing here? We're seeing the income, that 10% that we invoice for that project. So we're seeing the 25 of income. There's no cost so far. Okay, no time cost, no cost of goods sold, no equipment. We haven't entered any of this stuff. This is why it says 100% profit margin. But this is the profit margin of what we've actually have invoiced and what we have actually paid for and created bills for. The real job profit margin is actually sitting here where it says estimate, the estimate revenue and the estimate cost. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to see that profit margin here. You would have to click on transactions and open up that estimate, and you would see it inside the estimate. So you can always have to go back into the estimate to be able to see that estimated profit margin. So we'll save and close, go back into our project screen, and now we're going to start entering some bills, some time, some expenses against this job. I can go into the new button and create my expenses straight from here, or interesting enough, I can click on add to project here on the top right, and then I can create my expenses from there as well. It's going to be the same thing regardless. So let's go to expense, and then we'll go ahead and go to Garcia Plumbing, one of our subcontractors, and let's say we're going to use our labor line here, and let's say they're charging us for 25 hours, and it was $75 an hour, and this is our cost. This is what we're going to pay, what we are going to pay our contractors, and we just make sure that our customer job is attached to it. Kind of the nice part about creating an expense from that Add to Project button is that it will automatically add every single line to that project, which is really nice. So let's say we also have some materials they're going to charge us for here, and let's say that's $500. So you get to see it. It's supposed to be in both sides. Not sure why it's acting so tricky here, but it should be there. Let's click on save and let's just make sure that saves. Yep, that's saved in there. Beautiful. So both my expenses are assigned to this project. There's a little billable link here if you want to see the billable transaction. We're not going to bill our customer because we're already invoicing from the estimate. So let's click on save, save and close. And now let's enter another expense against this project. We're going to click on add to project one more time. And then we're going to click on bill. So let's say we're going to get a bill for, let's say, Equipment Depot. And here's my equipment information. QuickBooks tends to try to guess what your next move is. So it puts a description in there, and I misspelled backhoe there. And then so I can put here whatever it happens to be. So let's say it's 2 hours at $150 per hour that we're going to rent this particular equipment for. We'll click on save. We'll X out of that. And let's enter, let's say, some hours. So we're going to add to project. Let's enter some time. And let's say we have one of our internal employees, Carlos here, that's going to work on this project. So Carlos spent 8 hours on this project. And we'll put here the project was Joe Mitchell master bathroom. And the service here was just labor. And I have to make it billable in order for it to show up in the cost. So we're going to click on done and save. So now we have a little bit of everything. We got our bills, our expenses, our equipment. Let's add one more contractor here. Let's do a check, which I can do through add project for some reason. So we're going to go to new and do check. And let's say we have another contractor here. Let's just create a new contractor here. Let's do John Contractor. So we'll create a new vendor here called John Contractor. Let's spell John correctly here. Click on save. And we're going to pick an item again. We'll do labor. And let's say he's charging us $1,200 and he's going to build the furniture. Something like that. Okay, so we can have all sorts of details in here. And because I use a new button and not the add to project button, I have to remember to make sure that I assign the customer project. I'm going to mark it billable. So it shows up in my cost screen. And now we get to see all the information. So we see the total income that we have charged so far. That's the 10% of the invoice. We see our hourly time cost for Carlos. We see our cost of goods sold. And then we can actually expand that to see specifically what it was. So we had some direct labor, some equipment rental, some supplies and materials. All that information is in there. And then we get to see what is our operating profit so far. Now, this is the tricky part of construction accounting, where the transactions that you have put on the system are not necessarily what you have earned on the job. Because remember, the job originally had a 35% profit margin. If I go back to transactions and I go back into my original estimate, I'm supposed to have positive profit. I'm supposed to have a profit margin. But why in the world is QuickBooks telling me that I am making negative profit margin? It's because in this screen, the profit margin is being calculated solely on the transactions that you have put so far. Just because the timing of it, I've only invoiced 10% so far, and I've only had $4,000 in costs, doesn't mean I'm losing money. I mean, there's obviously potential negative cash flow on the job, but I'm not losing money. It's not being unprofitable. And the reason why it's important to point this out is because there's one specific report that this advanced edition of QuickBooks Online has, which normalizes this issue and gives you the sort of the truth about your profitability. So I'm going to click on Projects Report. And then in here, we have really powerful reports. So this one's called Estimates versus Actuals. And then we have this one called Work in Progress by Project. Those two things are really, really important because they tell you the truth about the project. So we're going to click on Estimate versus Actuals. We'll click on that, and that's going to give me a detailed report of this specific job, of Joe Mitchell's master bathroom remodel. And then we get to see the breakdown per product or service. This is why, again, I'm advocating for you to use product and services and not use account. So don't use the income account, don't use the cost of goods sold account, don't use the labor account. Use the items, the products and services you created and then mapped in order to give you this piece of information. This is an extremely valuable, important report. So let's start with the estimated cost. This is the stuff that we saw in the original estimate. This is what we're expecting to see. We're expecting to see $3,500 worth of labor, $675 of equipment, $12,000 in materials. This is a total of $16,000 in estimated costs for the project. Then we have actual costs. This is the stuff that we've put a bill or an expense on a check, right? And also on a timesheet. Okay? As we talked about much earlier, this is not payroll yet because we don't have payroll enabled on this file, but this is based on the burden cost of the particular item and is grabbing the cost from the timesheet. This stuff is not going to post on the P&L report. Only the actual payroll written is what we'll post on the P&L. But at least on this report, the one where you're trying to understand what your profitability is or your estimated profitability, this gives you a good general idea. So we have our estimated cost. We add up to the $4,300 that we see so far. And then the important thing here is sort of the percentage, right? So we've only done a percentage. So if you take 4,000 and you divide it by 16,000, you get roughly 25%. Now these percentage differences, they're just really there to kind of tell you how far off we are from having full expenditures. I don't like these percentages. They're just all weird. Like they don't really have much of a meaning. So I really tend to just ignore these percentages. So I just like sort of the dollar differences. If you click on the gear menu, unfortunately you can't remove them. So you kind of have to like deal with them. Then let's go over to the income side. So we got stuff like estimated income. So we're estimating 25 grand. But the actual income that we have here is 2,500. So that just gives you a general idea where you stand in terms of the individual items, because I like the fact that you can track them at the item level. Okay, you can item at the item level, which is particularly important because look, for labor, we're almost tapped out. Like we had a budget of 3,400. We're already at 3,400. If you actually add these up, we're going to be at 3,400. So we're actually pretty much very close to being tapped out or tapped out fully of our labor. So that's how you know we're halfway through the project or 25% through the project or whatever it is. We know, hey, can we spend any more money on labor? And if we do, we're going to be unprofitable in that portion of the job. So this gives you sort of that global piece of information of what's going on with the job at the line item level. So the other report here is called the work in progress by project. That's going to be a much better report in terms of giving you just more valuable information, and percentages here actually make a lot more sense. So this is going to be global. This is going to be across all the jobs. So we have here project name, kitchen remodel, backyard remodel, and master bathroom remodel. That's the one that we're actually using. So check this out. We got estimated cost of 16,000, actual cost 4,000. Here's that 25.96%. That percentage actually makes sense, okay? Then we have our estimated income, which is 25,000. And this is a very key thing. What you've actually invoiced is irrelevant for the work in progress report. What matters is your calculated income, which is basically 25% of the estimated income, which is where the 6,556 come from. So regardless of how much you have actually invoiced, I've only invoiced 2,500, this particular report, the WIP report, the work in progress report, actually gives you an estimate. So if you actually take the 6,000 compared to the 4,300, that gives you a true visual of where are you profitability wise, okay, regardless of what you have invoiced. So for example, we'll leave this report as is. We'll go back and refresh it. Let's go back into our project. So we'll go back here into projects, open this in a new tab, and then we'll go back into our master bathroom remodel project, and then we're going to go ahead and invoice some more. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my transactions, go into my estimate, and then do a little bit more progress invoicing. So I click here, it says convert to invoice, and then essentially do a little bit more of the percentages. So let's say now I'm going to invoice, let's say 40%. So I'm going to invoice 10,000. Create invoice. Okay, remember, I haven't added any expenses. I've just done additional invoicing to this job. And again, most of these things are based on contractual points, right? On the project phases, or on specific accomplishments or deadlines, or contractual indications of where you can start invoicing. This is just a timing issue. This shouldn't affect your profitability. On this projects page, it shows now that you have a lot more profit margin. Again, what you're seeing here is not your real profit margin. That's just profit margin based on the transactions that exist in QuickBooks. If you were to create no more transactions, all the invoices and all the costs, then this would be your true profit margin. But what you really got to do is you got to go back into this work in progress report. We'll hit refresh here, and then and now we get to see the actual income says 12,000. Right? That's the addition of both the invoices we created. And the reality is that the calculated earned amount doesn't change because it's still 25% of the 25,000, right? So that's the really important piece of this whole thing, is that the amount that you have invoiced so far is not what matters. You know, what matters is the amount that you have earned. Now, what's interesting about this dollar difference is it's not the dollar amount left for you to invoice. Is the difference between what you've actually have invoiced versus what you have earned. And in some construction accounting scenarios, that's called the overbillings and the underbillings. So this is kind of like your overbilling, underbilling tracker. And the last advanced type of report worth mentioning for projects is we go back into projects, we'll open up any of the projects, and then here where it says project reports, we'll scroll all the way down to where it says estimates versus actuals by project. So it's the same estimate versus actuals, but it's actually going to encompass all the projects together, which is a little bit tricky report to look at. But if you actually look at each of these projects, so you see the project name, kitchen remodel, and this is sort of the first edition using the new reporting system. Now we get all of our items here. So we have labor, materials, equipment, labor, equipment, all that stuff. And then we get to see our actual costs, the cost difference from our estimated cost. So this kitchen remodel didn't contain the new cost estimates or the project estimate feature. And then you get the rest of the information, an estimated income and actual income. So you're going to see more and more reports look like this one, like the new reporting module. It's a little bit harder to read, and they're still sort of working through the aesthetics of the report to give you more sort of filtering options or more settings, so you can kind of change what this looks like. For example, if I go to filter, I can go into product and service and then put here not empty. And then that way I'm only seeing the actual products and services. I'm not seeing anything that doesn't have a product and service. Or in the case of having any transactions where the user didn't choose the products and service, that's a good example. And eventually you'll have more settings where you can remove some of these columns or add more columns in the future. So you're going to be accustomed to seeing more reports that look like this style and not the old style, which is the one that we saw when we did a regular estimate versus actual. So depending on when you watch this video, you might be looking at the old reporting system, which what you're seeing now, or maybe possibly the new reporting system. The old reporting system seems to be easier to read so far. So we'll see how long the old reporting system remains. So we'll go back here into projects, and there really shouldn't be anything else that's related to the advanced edition of QuickBooks Online. We've covered pretty much everything. I do strongly recommend that you do go through all the settings, go into transactions, look at all these transactions, look into time activity, and see what happens when you create timesheets. Look at all your project reports. You have all sorts of options here. Look at your project details here. One thing that's worth adding or mentioning, with Advanced, you can have custom fields added to the projects. So for example, if there's additional information that you want to track, so like right now, the only information we have is the name of the project, the customer, start date, notes. Okay, but let's say I wanted to add something else, like maybe the type of material that we have or the hours of the day that we can work on the project, things like that. So we would go to add custom field, and then we'll create the type of custom fields we wanna create. So we'll go here to name, and then we'll put here hours or something like that. And then we know what type of hours these people, we can work on this job. So we'll do a drop down list and then we'll create multiple options. So we'll do like 9 to 5, and then we'll add one called 9 to 6. And then we'll add, 8 to 8 or 7 to 4, something like that. And then again, these are just custom fields. So then when I'm adding custom fields to this, we can, okay, here, manage custom fields. We get to see all the custom fields that we can create. Okay, and then when we go back into editing that project, so let's go back into projects here. Go back into master bathroom remodel, edit the project. Now we have the custom fields here, and then we can pick, these are kind of the hours that we can work on that job. And you can put anything you want in here. Obviously, I was very rudimentary. I didn't put AM or PM. You put whatever you want. I mean, this is really up to you how you track this stuff. You can also have like the job foreman, right? Like who's in charge of this job. So we'll go to add custom field. We'll put foreman, and then we'll do a drop down list as well. And then we'll put Mike and Mary, and let's say one more. Let's say we have Steve. So these are like all the people that kind of like run these jobs, and we'll create the drop down menu. So then when I go edit this project, I just have a drop down menu there. We can skip the drop down menu and just have a blank field. That could work as well. But again, it just gives you a lot more information about the job when you actually go into project details. Now, when we go back to all projects and we click on the gear menu, one of the things that would be nice to see, which we don't get to see yet, maybe in the future, you get to see some of the custom fields in here. That would be really useful because in this dashboard, I can know, okay, like what are the high level piece of information that I need to know. Unfortunately, to get to that information, you still have to kind of go in there and go into project details and see it from there. So that's it. That's kind of where we at with projects in QuickBooks Online, or construction for accounting, or project-based business contractors for QuickBooks Online in both QuickBooks Online Plus and QuickBooks Online Advanced. As you can tell, there's still a long way to go. There's a whole bunch of things that you still cannot track. There's other things that we haven't covered, like we haven't covered adjacent issues like how to track contractors and pay them 1099s and that sort of thing. There's other tutorials that cover that stuff. I just wanted to be laser focused on, okay, how do you enter the expenses? How do you enter estimates? How do you enter invoices? And how do you track the profitability of jobs when they're completed, when they're in real time with both Plus and the advanced version of QuickBooks Online. So I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next one.